Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to another Pucks with Haggs podcast powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I am your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal. And I answer a Q&A, a weekly Q&A session with subscribers, which we're actually going to use a bunch of those questions in a mailbag episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast today with my friend Conor Ryan of Boston.com. Connor, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Joe.
You got it. Thank you for being here. I appreciate here on a Friday afternoon as we roll into the sort of sad ending to the Bruins season that is upon us. But Connor's going to be here to answer your questions along with me. This is the 180th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. So thank you very much, as always, for listening. Let's also thank our sponsors real quick. Our friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS. And get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, if you need any kind of tickets whatsoever, thank our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, of course, but again, create an account at Game Time and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Connor?
Game time.
Game time. That's right, my friend. All right. Let's get into it. We'll just go over where we are and set the table here for the Bruins. 5-2 loss to the Blackhawks last night. Nick Foligno has 2 goals. Ryan Donato has a goal. Tyler Bertuzzi has a goal. The Bruins gave up 3 goals in 93 seconds in the third period. Jeremy Swayman, I did not realize this until after the game when I looked at the game sheet, allowed 3 goals on 3 shots in the third period.
It's not great.
No,
that's all you're looking for, Joe.
It's not, but it's like it's a continued, with each time you see this, it just hammers home more and more that that's just what this team was this year. And it wasn't going to be anything different, nothing aberrational about anything that we've seen. It's just more of the same. I kind of had full confidence going into that game. A lot of people were saying, oh, they're going to roll over the Blackhawks. Blackhawks stink. The Bruins are in danger of screwing up their high first round pick. I was like, I have full confidence that this team is going to lose to a team like the Blackhawks. And I've said it a few times, I feel like I really felt like that Devils game in New Jersey is going to be the last feel-good moment of the year for this team. There was so many things going on, so many guys hit milestones and big numbers and big round numbers, and rookies were getting their first points and first goals with the Bruins, and there was all this other stuff going on. It just felt like, to me, it's been a while since there was a nice moment like that with the Bruins team, and it felt like it wasn't going to come along again in these last few, and it's just going to be like what we saw last night for probably these last couple of games, and then they'll get a top 5 pick in the first round, and it'll end up being beneficial for them. They're sort of finishing it. The Bruins management, I would put it this way, is kind of steering into the iceberg instead of away from the iceberg, and I think that's perfectly okay given the situation that they're in, and I think that was just more evidence of it last night against the Blackhawks.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that anyone who even saw the game on Tuesday against the Devils thinking that was any sort of spark down the stretch there. I don't know if people were expecting all of a sudden. And listen, David Pasternak's doing whatever he can to drag this team into being a somewhat competitive group, but can't do that every single. Yeah, that whole line, even that with Elias Lindholm, which for the whole first couple months of the year, that was kind of one of the main bumps in the road that kind of started this whole slide of the season, was the fact that I think all of us assumed that Elias Lindholm, all right, maybe he's not a line driver by himself, but you put him with David Pastrnak. I mean, if Pastrnak can play with Zacha, with Eric Haula, you can easily get 60 points out of Elias Lindholm, right? Did not work at all. And now, of course, that the season is completely out of reach, the playoffs not happening, they are clicking, which I don't know how much you put stock into that, do you hope that carries over into next year? If you're the Bruins, you probably hope so, because, again, I think Elias Lindholm is what he is at this point of the year, but if he can hang with David Pastrnak, and by extension, you can get 55, 60 points out of just being on the line with him, you'll take it. You need to do something to somewhat justify that 7.75 million payout. So maybe that is one positive. And even like, I wouldn't say it's all just been dour, because like you're still seeing, I think Fraser Minton's looked pretty solid. Like
Yep.
Lysel's making a few more plays, at least here and there.
Yep.
There's been a few guys. Mason Lohrei has not done that well down the stretch here, these extra minutes, but all you consider, it feels like the Bruins are doing what, if you're a fan, you're at least encouraged by the fact that, one, some players are stepping up and playing okay, and also you keep on losing. It means you're still in the running for that top 5 pick. So
yeah, you are being very polite with Mason Lohrei and underselling the
yeah,
-43 that
yeah,
he's now
it's not great.
end of the season, which looks like it's going to be the worst plus-minus mark in the entire NHL this season. Connor Bedard is close behind. It's going to be a race to the finish between those two. But like hearing those two names and knowing the kind of skill that they bring to the table, like it's the same as being a 20-game loser in baseball. Like you have to be a pretty good player to even get to that point. In order to be the worst plus-minus in the NHL, you have to be a pretty good player to get the chance to even like rack up that kind of a horrible dash next to your name. And there are times where I think plus-minus is antiquated and like doesn't apply anymore, or you can't put too much weight on it. But if like you're that bad with the plus-minus, it says something. Like it is that kind of a mark, and that kind of, especially when it's way worse than everybody else in the team, comparatively speaking, I think there is something to read out of that, and there is something to glean from it, and it does have weight and it does have meaning. So, I think he's definitely struggled and is going to need to be better next year defensively. And part of it is for sure that he has had to play up with Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy out. He's had to play against best players. He's had to play in more situations than he's probably used to, and things that maybe he could get away with as a third pairing defenseman, you're not going to be able to get away with when you're playing the other team's best players that will make you pay for any kind of turnover you make at the blue line. And Joe Sacco was speaking to all that stuff after the game. But I feel like with him, the talent is there. I think the confidence level is still there, even though there's been a lot of dashes lately and it's been a rough second half for him. And I think he will continue to play his way out of it and figure it out. I just think, I'm not going to move him to forward like some, social media followers want, and like completely overhaul what he does and change who he is. I think he's got the chance to be a really good difference-making defenseman. He probably just needs to be put in a box where you're maximizing his strengths and minimizing his weaknesses, and he's just going to be that kind of a player. I'm not sure he's going to be a guy that's going to be a 25-minute a night, number one or number two, that's going to be able to play in all situations, just given some of the issues that we've seen defensively. But, to your point about, and the other one I would say is Zadorov, with Jokiharju, I think has been a much, much better player over the last month or two. That partnership is really good. I think they need to bring Jokiharju back. I think that was an excellent trade by the Bruins. And I was saying this last night after the game. Like, I love Brandon Carlo, great person. I think he did a really good job here. But I think seeing Jokiharju with Zadorov and seeing how solid, how quiet his game is, how you don't really notice him that much because he doesn't make a ton of mistakes and he just goes out there and eats minutes and moves the puck and plays good, solid defense and does everything well. It really puts a big contrast on what we had seen out of Brandon Carlo the last couple of years, where he would make a lot of mistakes that you would notice and that were not good and that were, turning into goals and plays in the back of the net. And you don't see that with Jokiharju. And it underscores for me how much Carlo was struggling the last couple of years here, seeing a different defenseman come in and really bring a much different kind of game. So I've liked him a lot, especially with Zadorov. But to your point about Zadorov and Lindholm, Elias Lindholm, I think he's been much better too. Like maybe they're starting to settle in and show exactly what they can do. And everybody, now that some of the pieces have been changed, everybody in that dressing room is figuring out, hey, we just have to, make the best of what we have, and we have to figure out to make it work, way to make it work with these people and get combos going that are going to work and start doing what's best for the team instead of who we'd like to play with or what we think is best for us or, whatever, or what we're used to doing, because that's the way we've always done it in the past. It's very clear they're going to have to do things a lot differently now, and some of the players have changed, and it's just going to be a different way to solve the problem and to win games moving forward. And I think all of those players are going to have to be open-minded to that rather than relying on what worked in the past. It's going to have to be a different way to get it done for the Boston Bruins moving forward.
Yeah, and you just look at the amount of roster turnover that's happened this year, but also just going into this offseason with the amount of vacancies all across the depth chart that this team's going to be busy doing. But I also think you've got so many holes that it's almost like you also just need to prioritize just NHL talent to fill the roster, right? Which is not the case really this year. So again, to your point, Yoki Haru, he's not the flashiest player, but he is an NHL caliber player that makes guys better. I made the comparison. A lot of people did not like it because a lot of people are very divisive on this player. But I said he kind of reminds me of Finnish Matt Grzelcyk, where you don't notice him all the time, but with the right partner can complement them and makes life easier for the other partner, right? That's why he worked well with McAvoy. And I think he does a good job of just doing the simple work to make Zadorov comfortable and kind of steady his game out. So, yeah, a guy like him, I think you bring back and it fills a roster spot. You look at what Lindholm's doing. And, yeah, I think for Lindholm, it's huge because obviously the most pressing need for this team and what they need to do to kind of start a new contention window here is getting talent down the middle. I don't know how realistic that is for this offseason, right? I don't think there's a free agent center out there. So if you're able to, go into next year and Lindholm can just ride shotgun with David Pastrnak and stay in a top 6 role and not be a really overpriced third line center like he was for a majority of this year, especially down the stretch, and you're able to, keep him in a spot and then ideally draft a center with a top 5 pick, then at least you've got something to work with, right? As opposed to we need a center, let's overpay for the next guy that's out there on the market or try to find a trade when there really isn't one out there. So I do think that if you're able to keep that momentum going with Lindholm and Pastrnak, which again, Pasternak's kind of done it with everyone in terms of driving play with them, that would be a huge plus for the Bruins as they try to just retool and reshuffle their roster going into next year.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is that Pastrnak is on board with it, I think. And, as long as he believes in the guy that's playing with him and there's trust there, it's almost like the Tom Brady trust thing. He has to have trust in the guys that he's playing with. Once that happens, I think it opens the door for a lot of different things. And I think you're starting to see that now with Lindholm playing with him, that there's an acceptance of him as a potential line mate and a trust that maybe wasn't there at the beginning of the season. Which is good. Yoki Haru, I think the Grzelcyk comparison is interesting, and it's apt in a lot of ways. The one thing I would say is Yoki Haru is better defensively than Grzelcyk.
Yeah.
He's less of a liability, and that makes him a much better fit overall, especially in the playoffs, where Grzelcyk I think would get picked on in his own end sometimes. I think Yoki Haru, that's not going to be really an issue for him. So it's that's a good player. That's a good player they brought in. For a nominal 4th round pick, a really good move for Don Sweeney there. And to your point, if they get in the top 5, and I think it's pretty clear they're going to draft a center, right? There's a bunch of them there that are good candidates. They'll get a player that's going to help them in a couple of years. And that makes it a lot easier if they've just got to fill the void for a year or two until they feel like that guy's going to be ready to come in and be a top 6 guy. And, who knows what Matt Poitras is going to look like next year too. I still don't rule out him, certainly a top 9 center for them and a guy that's going to be a pretty good player, but still, I'm still not going to rule out a top 6 because he's so young. And I think that the offensive potential is there. The playmaking potential is there. He just needs to continue to get bigger and stronger and work on his skating. But I think there's some good potential there for him to, make another leap moving forward. And, leaving him at the Providence level, I think now is good because I think rushing him last year wasn't the greatest thing for his development in hindsight. And it did set him back a little bit. And, maybe another year and another off season of sort of, working out and maturing, he'll be a different player when he comes to camp next year. I mean, that's a hope, right? That he can be a guy that can fill in there, and we'll see if that happens. All right, let's move on to some questions here, Connor. I think we've kicked around the Bruins for long enough here. The first 14 minutes of the show. This is from Mark Daniels. This was in the Q&A over at Boston Sports Journal. I brought a couple of those questions over here. Who are the current forwards and blue liners that you think will not be on the team next year? So there's a long list, but who comes to mind for you? Who comes
Yeah.
to mind for you as guys that you don't think are going to be back?
I mean, I think you're looking at a lot of that bottom six is probably getting overhauled, right? Like you've got a lot of guys who you
Yep.
could reasonably bring back, but other than Kastelik and maybe Minton, if you want to really go young there, and it remains to be
Yep.
seen there. There's a lot of guys that are either you feel like you're either going to add in free agency if you're looking for like another scoring winger or something, or is it it's all seems like it's a bunch of guys that are just all in the mix, right? Like, do you qualify and bring back Johnny Beecher? Like, what do you do with Cole Koepke? What do you do with Lauko?
Yep.
You got Riley Duran now in the mix, and I think he was as advertised in his first
Yep.
game, and he's a guy that I think is going to be a really intriguing candidate. So I think there's a lot of that bottom six is either due to be overhauled or it's not determined other than a guy like Kastelik down the middle. And then I think you've got the AHL players like Lettieri, who's been a good foot soldier this year and done his job. But this team, clearly needs help down the middle, but they also need like one or two wings just to push some more of the talent further down the depth chart. So there's a whole lot of guys you can look to. And even like I feel like the decor, it's once you have McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm back, it all kind of more or less falls into place, especially if you're bringing Yuki Haru back. And,
Yeah.
even
That's
like I
the
think
whole
Andrew,
key, I think, is bringing him back.
yeah, like I think after that, you're pretty much, I would imagine you're pretty set, right? Because I think Andrew Peak, again, he's not the flashiest player, but I think he's been solid, and again, at this point for this year, you're not going to be able to really overhaul everything in one offseason.
No.
But if you're able to fill out your lineup with more NHL talent than AHL talent, and you have a draft pick and you've made some moves in the offseason and you seem like you're riding the ship a little bit, I think that's the priority. But there's, I think, a lot of players that are probably on the roster right now that probably won't be here next September.
Yeah, like Weatherspoon's a guy I'm not sure he's going to be back, and I think he's served his role and he's done well. And we were talking about this the last show. I feel like that's a place where Michael Callahan, if they want to bring him back, could replace him. And if they sign him to a one of those low money 2 or 3 year deals to be like the 7th D to start, and if he can work his way into the bottom pairing, great. But sort of have a defined role where he could be like Weatherspoon and he's on the roster and he's sort of bouncing back and forth. I think he's shown some value and an ability to play at the NHL level. And I think that could be of interest to the Bruins. So like, I feel like that's an area where there could be change. Definitely, like I wish Lauko would come back. I'd love for the Bruins to bring him back because he's so good for us to talk about Game of Thrones and MCU and video games.
Everything.
Pop culture and telling stories about going to see Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies in Providence when he first got there. And like, he couldn't believe people were dressing up and going to the theater in the United States. He was like, his check mind was blown seeing people dressed up in costumes going to the movies. Like I'm going to miss all that stuff if he's not there. And like, he's a good player on the ice too. He's a good bottom six guy with speed, tenacity. He'll drop the gloves. Like he brings energy, brings a little bit of everything. And Cole Koepke, I think, has had a pretty good year. He's double digits in goals. Like he's been a decent player for them. He's got good speed. He's a pretty good sized guy. He dropped the gloves a few weeks ago to show like, that he cares and that he wants to be there and that he wants to bring energy and do what's required of him. And, I think all of those guys have shown a little bit this year, but to your point, I think they need guys that can be like have a little bit more high end and can bring a little bit more to the table than those players have. But at the same time, like at the beginning of the year when Kastelik was healthy, Kastelik, Koepke, and Beecher looked like a great fourth line. They looked really good when they were together, and then they started moving all the pieces around and changing things up, and it wasn't quite the same anymore. And I think Kastelik, as long as he's healthy, and if you put him as the fourth line center, I think you're going to find wingers and you're going to have a pretty effective fourth line. I do agree with you. I don't think they should qualify Johnny Beecher. I don't think he should come back. Like, I think at this point, you got to sort of make the admission that you made a mistake there with the first round pick. Like, he's just not, I think, a really difference-making NHL player. He's constantly going to show you good skating. He can win faceoffs. He's a good kid. Like, he's a good person, like happy-go-lucky kid. I like him. But you can't go 40-something games without scoring a goal. And the only goal you do score is either an empty netter or it bounces off you and goes in the net. Like, he's just not bringing enough to the table to justify his spot and to justify where he is. And so I think players like that should get changed out, and they've got to bring other guys in. And maybe some of the other guys will come back in supportive, like, or a depth type positions, like Vinny Lettieri. I would take him all day long every year as a probably guy that could be a leader down there, and then we'll come up if you need him at the NHL level because he can actually play, and we'll every once in a while put in a goal for you. And by all truths, watching him play, if he was a little bigger, I think he would be in the NHL. I think he's got good speed, he's got good skill. I just think he's not big enough, maybe. To serve that role consistently. But there's some guys I would like to see come back, maybe not at the NHL level, but certainly as depth players. But I do think there's going to be a clearing of the decks with a lot of these players. And I think understandably so. Maybe one or two of them come back. We'll see. But there's going to be a lot of changes this offseason. There should be, at this point, I feel like, if there's ever a season that the Boston Bruins have had in the last 20 or so years where you need to see some significant sizable change at the end of the season, this would be it.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, there's a lot of those guys like Lauko. I feel like it would have a lot of value, not just the fact off the ice, he's a great dude and good guy to have in the room, I imagine. But in terms of can drop the gloves, I think is cognizant of when the team needs kind of a shift in energy, even if it means dropping the gloves with a guy that's much larger than him, right? Doesn't seem like he's
Watson, ever. He said he had no idea how big he was until he got in the middle of the fight. He's like, uh-oh.
Yes, exactly. So a guy like that who I think recognizes what he needs to do, right, to give his team a little bit of a spark there. Never one to lack in terms of effort or anything like that. So even if it's a fourth line spot or if he's in and out of the lineup, I think he brings a lot of value to be able to bring him back. And then, there's a lot of guys that could be in the mix. Even you look at a guy like Duran, who I think showed a lot of progress this year in Providence, especially later on in the year. Has a really high motor.
He was excellent last night. He was excellent with Fraser Minton and with Kuznetsov, who I think will be back.
Yeah.
They looked good as a line, and then Pasternak was saying after the game he thought they was their best line during the game.
Yeah, even if you want to look at in terms of skating, right? If you're able to bring some sort of grouping next year of Kuznetsov, Kastelik, Duran with Lauko in and out of the lineup, that's a lot of speed and kind of pace and upside, right? In terms of the fourth line. I'm not saying that Kastelik's going to be a 30-point guy if he's fully healthy, but I think you got four guys that skate well, are physical, can make plays happen, can drop the gloves when needed, and has kind of the speed and the skill to keep the pace as well, in today's NHL. So even right there, feels like that's a group that there's a lot to like about what they all could kind of offer. And it's also just about, as you said with Kastelik, just staying healthy. When he's out of the lineup, everything kind of goes out of whack. It's same with the decor. When you don't have McAvoy and Lindholm, you miss their presence, but also just puts everyone else in tough spots where they're not used to it, and the whole kind of house of cards unravels after that, right? So I think just getting guys healthy back in the lineup is also the biggest key.
Yeah, no doubt. And the thing with Kastelik that concerns me is just that if it has anything to do with concussions and any kind of lingering stuff going on with him missing time now, and just the way that he plays and what a high contact, high physicality kind of player, high intensity player he is. If it starts to become a concussion thing, that's a concern, and a little bit of something that you need to, treat carefully like they're doing right now, but also keep a close eye on. And you hope that doesn't curb his style of play and the way that he plays, and that he's also taking care of himself, obviously, because that's such a serious issue. But that's, that was something that I've been thinking about a little bit with him the second half of the year, just because they've missed his presence, no question about it. But you just hope he comes back fully healthy, fully healed next year, fully ready to go and playing exactly the way he did this year, because the Bruins are absolutely going to need that. And he would be a linchpin to a great fourth line if he were to come back and be totally fine. Let's take a pause real quick, Connor, to thank Prize Picks and talk about them. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun, and it's super simple. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. On PrizePicks, you can mix player projections from different sports, combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. Here are the picks for this week. Evgeny Malkin, more than 0.5 points per game. Max Celebrini, more than 20 minutes time on ice. You will love that one as a BU guy there, Connor. Patrick Kane less than one. Patrick Kane less than 1.5 shots on goal, and I don't know if you know this or not, but Patrick Kane almost went to BU too. They were hard after him back in the day and couldn't land him. But I remember talking to the recruiters for BU. They were hot on his tail when he was an amateur player. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks now offers Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And let's get back to it. But I think the reason they did not get Patrick Kane is because they couldn't compete with the amount of money that the junior teams were throwing at him to go play there. And that ended up being the problem in the end, which is always the case back in the day. Thank God the NIL here is now to change all of that.
I was going to say, BU is going to be active with all these, now that all these Canadian junior guys can go to college. When Gavin McKenna is looking at going to a college team next year, BU is going to be knocking on the door, hopefully. So apparently a lot of the big teams are very interested in bringing him along, which I couldn't blame if you watch his highlight reel.
No, I don't think Connor would mind going to Agganis and watching him tool around in scarlet and white. That wouldn't be so bad.
I don't think so.
All right. This is from 98 Problems. Joe, did you see that Joe and Connor, did you see that Monty and the Blues just set a franchise record for 12 straight wins? Looks like the problem with the Bruins wasn't the coach, just like when Teflon Don canned Bruce Cassidy. It's about the lack of talent that Donnie acquired through free agency and the draft. Other than Pasta, can't win with a team full of third and fourth line forwards. He brought in a third line center and a third pairing D-man for first line money and then drafted a player in the first round that couldn't score a goal in a top-ranked college team for most of the season. No lies detected there, really. Need a new GM like Brian Lawton that understands the importance of analytics and acquiring players and cap management, running hockey ops for the Bruins. Your thoughts, Connor, on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think Don Sweeney is going to be back this offseason. So anyone who's hoping that there's going to be a change, even with how the team has bottomed out, I don't see that being the case. I don't think you move all those roster players, the captain, guys under contract like Carlo, and the ownership's like, all right, thank you. Now we'll move on, right? Like this offseason, I think, is very much you guys made this mess. How can you untangle it? I think you saw what happened, in 2015, where you have a new regime change with Don Sweeney coming in, and they had to nail that draft, and it did not work out. So I don't think they're in a spot where they're going to overhaul when you really need to be decisive and impactful with the moves you make this offseason. So I don't see that being the case. Also, I think Don Sweeney and his staff are also very heavily involved in analytics and stuff like that. So it's not like I think they're just throwing stuff at a whiteboard. I don't think, respectfully, any NHL front office is antiquated now. I think they factor all those things in. So it's not like they're just on YouTube looking at highlight reels and like, we like this guy. Like, it's not how it is in today's NHL.
My buddy coached him in Saskatoon. We're going to draft this guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's always the case in today, at least. And then, with Montgomery and the Blues, I mean, the results are what they are. I'm of the opinion, Joe, that I feel like the Bruins are ready to move on from Montgomery anyway. I don't think, and also
he's ready to move on from the Bruins.
And I think he was honestly pretty checked out. Yes. Like, it feels like that the roster is what it was, but I saw no effort or motivation to try to claw out and and change their approach to get winning hockey out there. And when it was going off the rails, I didn't see a coach who is hard pressed to do anything to pull them out of it. So I think that's my overall take. And I feel like the Bruins, as soon as he left, were like, that's about right. So I'm not putting too much stock into whatever Montgomery does in the Blues. Let's see what he does in the first round, and then I'll see how the Blues actually do. Yeah.
Let's see if he coaches it like he coached that first round against the Florida Panthers a couple of years ago. And he made all the wrong moves and they ended up squandering a 3-1 lead in that series. And I think Jim Montgomery is a solid coach. Do I think he's a great coach? No way. Do I think he really wanted to be in Boston? Do I think he was okay with getting fired and then going right to St. Louis and kind of had an escape plan? Yes. Do I think he knew his contract was up and he was probably going to leave after the end of the season one way or the other? Yes. Like, I just don't – like, if you go back and look, the training camp was terrible. that he had. Like, they had an awful training camp. They weren't ready to start the year and weren't ready to play. He never really adjusted his system, even though he clearly did not have the personnel to run his hold on to the puck in the offensive zone, make plays, short passing, like defensemen taking risks and going way down low in the offensive zone, like all the stuff he likes to do. He didn't have the personnel to do it. And as a good coach would adjust what he's doing to the personnel that he has, he never did that. He tried to continue to like play Monty hockey with a bunch of guys that clearly were not the caliber of the ability to do that. And he really needed to do what Joe Sacco did when he came in, which was simplify, make things much more conservative, and try to play low scoring games where you're playing good fundamental defense, and you're supporting your goalie, who clearly was not as good. That was the other part of this like whole season falling apart, was the goalie wasn't ready to go at the start of the year because of the holdout. And that really, that plus the Monty thing really put this team, I think, behind the 8 ball after the first 20 games of the year. And they were obviously never able to recover. But there's truth to, and it's very obvious, like on a night like last night, when you see Ryan Donato scoring his 30th goal. Tyler Bertuzzi has 22 goals. Nick Foligno has 15 goals and great leadership and is still doing his thing. It underscores for me the amount of players that the Bruins have moved on from, that have gone other places and really flourished offensively while the Bruins are struggling to score goals. And also the amount of veteran leadership that they've moved on, that they didn't adequately replace. Guys like Kevin Shattenkirk, Nick Foligno, James Van Riemsdyk, like the veteran sort of glue guys that you bring in for a year or two that help hold everything together and help support the leadership group within the room and create a bigger leadership group in a dressing room and a greater vibe, that doesn't allow things like I think what happened this year, where there are little fractures to happen, and keeps everybody, pulling on the same rope. I think that was a mistake too, and there wasn't enough of that. And I think Don Sweeney has acknowledged that. Like, I think they understand the shortcomings of this team, and I think Don Sweeney understands it more than anybody else. I think he's harder on himself than anybody else could ever be. I think he's ultimately accountable for all of it, gets the shortcomings that he had. And like, whenever he speaks publicly, he takes full accountability for any failings that the team has and puts it on his plate rather than blaming other people. And I give him full credit for that. And I'm not going to also cast any verdicts yet on Dean Letourneau, because he probably shouldn't have even been at Hockey East last year.
Yeah,
that
was a mistake.
Let's see him come back next year, see where he's at as a 19-year-old that's probably ready to play in Hockey East next year, a little more ready than he was this past year. He got rushed into it because Will Smith left and signed with the Sharks. And I think he probably was not aware of like what he was walking into, just based on him thinking he was going to play at BC and leave for 2 years to go pro. Like, no. Like, I remember when he said that at the draft, I was like, he has no idea what he's walking into at Boston College and Hockey East, coming from prep hockey in Canada. Like, he has no idea what the adjustment's going to be and how high level of hockey this is. So I'm going to give him a year too, but I just think, there's a way to craft the argument to make Don Sweeney and Bruins management look awful and fully culpable for like everything that happened, where I think there's a bunch of different factors going on here. And the bigger part of all of it, or the bigger overarching thing, is eventually the bill was going to come due for this team, with all the players retiring and leaving, and it being very difficult to replace Hall of Fame level players. And you're not going to be able to do it on the fly like they've been trying to do. And there was ultimately going to be a year or two where there was going to be a resounding thud. It's kind of like the Capitals, who have pointed to as a good model for the Bruins a couple of years ago when they traded Orlov and Hathaway and really sort of retooled then too, and bottomed out a little. And now they're going back up again. It's just a matter of, now they've put themselves in a position where they have to make a bunch of really good decisions and hit home runs and really, make great decisions with draft picks, with trades, with free agency, and get on that path that the Capitals were on a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's like, they ripped off the Band-Aid. Now it's, what do you have to do now to kind of build this team moving forward? And yet, like, I'm not trying to absolve Don Sweeney. As you said, like, there was a lot of mistakes made in terms of sooner or later the bill was going to be due. But the lack of like the veteran glue guys, as you said, I think was something that really did loom large this year. There were some
underestimating the amount of time it was going to take Lindholm and Zadorov to come into the fold too. I think they underestimated how long the adjustment period was going to be for those guys too.
Yeah, and like, relying on, I think, a lot of guys that had career years, shooting percentages being way up, like a lot of stuff regressed and a lot of stuff went to the wayside. But like, again, the optics are what they are, right? Like the Bruins aren't in the playoffs and Jim Montgomery's leading the Blues to the playoffs, but I'm not going to get into that discourse with Montgomery because I don't know. I was not impressed at all with how this season went in terms of when stuff goes off the rails. I think you want your coach to be doing what he can do to drag you out of it. And I saw no urgency or willingness to do that. And I think the Bruins route on him after 2023 with how that ended, because that was a disaster. You got last year where Sam Bennett punches Marchand in the face and you're looking for something from your coach to say publicly. And he says, well, I think the refs do a great job.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. You can be the better man against the Panthers and they'll kick your ass in the playoffs again. But I'm not one that's going to harp too much on that narrative or those optics, because again, we'll see what happens. Maybe he's going to see Joel Hofer in the playoffs and he's got a look in his eye and he's like, I'm going to play Joel Hofer in that first round matchup against Winnipeg, and maybe something will change there with them. But we'll see what happens. We'll see how the Blues do. We'll see how they navigate to the playoffs first.
Yeah, or maybe he'll start shoving his players on the bench and screaming in their ear.
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
Do that to your captain. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. This is from Green Highlander. Do you think all the Sweeney hate is overblown? Here we go. What did fans expect after years of leveraging the future to chase cups in the present? We should have won in 2019, and he put together an absolute wagon in 2023. That could easily have been 2 cups during his tenure. This season has been a shit show from the start. Swayman was never right. Monty came in with 1 foot out the door. Go back and look at the criticism of the way camp was conducted. There was no urgency, and complacency seemed to be the main takeaway. And this is kind of exactly what you were saying, Conor.
Yeah, no, and again, we're not saying that Don Sweeney is not culpable for where they are right now, but yes. I think it all depends on what you do this offseason, right? And I think that's how the ownership views it as well. If you have, $28 million in cap space and you spend it all on guys that are NHL players but don't move the needle, I don't know about that, right? If you spend $8.5 million on Brock Besser, who's the American version of Jake DeBrusk, right? Of like, could give you 30 goals, but has stretches, maybe he ends up with 24 and is not what you want out of an $8.5 million player. I think it all depends on what you do this offseason. Are you looking to make more hockey trades? Are you able to find something similar to the Zacha trade, right? So I think those are all things that play into it as to what exactly you're looking for, what exactly you need Don Sweeney to do. And yeah, like I think you have to give them credit for at least where the season went off the rails and they were just kind of treading water. It feels like they weren't going to make the playoffs. Like, again, rip the Band-Aid off, accelerate the retool a little bit, and then credit to them, they've completely bottomed out. So you're able to get, if you have 1 year where everything has gone off the rails and this the question of it being a shit show in training camp and nothing going right, if you're able to go through a year of dysfunction where everything has gone wrong and you have cap space and especially you have a top 5 pick to bank moving forward, you're making the most of what this year was. Now it's what you do this summer to build off of that. And I think that's what everyone has to see from Don Sweeney, because it's a tough task of getting this team back in the right direction. But I think they've at least got a good foundation to start with going into this summer. Yeah,
I think that once they determined and analyzed that this team, the sub was going down and it was going down to the bottom of the ocean, and this season was not gonna was gonna bottom out. They were not gonna be in the playoffs. Once they analyzed that this was a lost season and correctly deduced that this was a lost season, I think every move they've made since then has been excellent. Like, I think all the deadline deals were good. Tons of great value for Carlo, great value for Coyle. It's going to end up being a first-round pick for Marchand. I think that, they've made a lot of really good decisions. Jokiharju, bringing him in, was a really good one. Like, they've set themselves up, and the way that they've approached the end of this season too, of just putting AHL players out there and young players on the roster at the end, and make kind of ensuring that they weren't going to pull a Buffalo Sabres and go on a 7 or 8 game winning streak at the end of the year to take themselves out of top 5 lottery contention. They've put themselves in a really good position all around. And I've said this a couple of times. Picking top 10 in the first round, the chances are good you're going to get a pretty good player, but not great. picking top 5 in the first round, there's great chances you're going to get a very good player that's going to help you for a long time. I think they're going to get an M1 center with a top 5 pick in the first round. And like, it's hard to miss with a top 5 pick. It really is, especially where, you can tell that he's, Don Sweeney is very intent on making the right pick by going and watching these players in person. And he's not just leaving it up to the scouting reports, because they know how important this pick is going to be to really turning things around. Because you can't trade and you can't pick up a free agent that's going to be a young number 1 center. You need to draft and develop that guy. I think it's the only way to acquire that kind of talent, to get the right player, to get exactly what you want. When you chase after that in free agency, that's how you end up with Elias Lindholm. And it's a bit of a fool's errand to try to find a number 1 center in free agency. All right. We're going to take another break real quick to talk about Game Time. With the final stretch run for the Bruins in the NBA playoffs right around the corner, now is the time to dig into the Game Time ticket app. The app is super easy to use and has tons of great features for sports, comedy, concerts, theaters, and all kinds of other tickets. Some great features too. Priority, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which filters out the fluff and only gives you good deals. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All-in pricing, you toggle this feature, shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and we all friggin' hate surprise fees, don't we? The lowest price guarantee. Connor does not like surprise fees. Me neither. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take out the guesswork of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Today's super deal is April 15th, Bruins versus the Devils, Loge floor 13, row 4 for only $153. And I saw there were tickets for like around $50 for Bruins on Game Time, which tells you just how low the demand is right now for these Bruins tickets for that Devils game on Tuesday night, April 15th. So go to Game Time if you want to go to the final Bruins game of the season, see the shirt off your back. Maybe there's this year's version of Jordan Caron where the player will give the fan the shirt off the back and the fan will be like, oh no, I don't.
Damn. Thought I was getting Bergeron.
Poor Jordan Caron. The fan did not even want his jersey off his back. The insensitive bastard. That reminds me of when I was in, let me finish with this. I'll say it afterwards. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Connor?
Game Time.
Game Time. I remember being like, I think I was a teenager, and I went to some event at Fenway where all the players, the Red Sox players, were lined up along the warning track signing autographs. Some like Bo Sox Club thing or something. Yeah. I'll never forget going and getting a John Dobson autograph on a baseball.
Hell yeah.
And I remember like the kid in front of me got something signed and then looked down and it was like, who the hell is John Dobson? And I just looked at him and I was like, dude, you'd think you make it to the major leagues, people would know your name, wouldn't you? And he was just like shaking and laughing.
Rough. It's a rough go of it. There was one time I was over by like the pesky pole, like before, like during like BP, everyone's signing the autographs and everything like that. And it was like Ortiz was out there. So all the kids were all like asking, had the baseball out. And then he like left and Julian Tavares came over and everyone's like, oh, it's like, it wasn't even like, from David Ortiz to like Trot Nixon or like someone like that. No, it's Julian Tavares is the encore act there. And everyone's like, no, I'm good.
Julian Tavares, weird cat. Yes. I covered the Red Sox teams when Julian Tavares was there. Strange friggin' dude. Just very weird. A lot of
rolling the ball to first base. I remember
there's a lot of bizarre stories about him and Manny Ramirez. The two of them had like a weird relationship. It was very bizarre. And yes. Tavares, like you could never quite figure out where the hell that guy was coming from. Always a little scared of him. Not going to lie to you. He seemed like there was a screw or two loose in his head. No doubt about it. All right. This is from RNDC2. Minton and Lysell are up now, who is showing they belong at the NHL level of the youngsters. Not seeing anyone getting me excited like Patra did last year. Thanks, Haggs. I don't think they have a can't miss person that's going to electrify the crowd. I did think that defenseman that set up that goal last night for the Blackhawks, I forget the kid's name. He was good. Like that play he made was excellent that I think it was Donato scored on. Where he just knifed through everybody. It was almost like a Low-Rye-esque play, except he made it down to the net, got a shot off. The Bruins don't have that kind of a prospect that's going to be like, oh, this kid is going to be here for 15 years. He's going to electrify the crowd with breathtaking impact moves. I like Minton. I think Minton is going to be a player that's going to be here for a while. He's solid, not spectacular, but he's a good, smart two-way player. He's pretty good size. He does the right things on the ice. I do not think Lysell is going to be here long term. I don't think he's shown enough. I really don't. Again, last night, he was like throwing drop passes to nobody instead of dumping the puck in the corner, getting blown off pucks by guys that were much bigger and stronger than him. I just don't think he has the impact level to overcome the mistakes that he consistently makes and has not learned from. I really like, to your point, loved Riley Duran, thought he was excellent in that role as a bottom six guy. He's really good sized. He's willing to mix it up physically and battle for pucks, hold pucks in the corner, win board battles. I think he's got underrated skill as far as his passing and shooting goes. He almost scored a couple times last night. One, the goalie had to make a really good save on a shot in front. And that the best scoring chance he had started because he was holding the puck down low in the corner and made a couple of really good plays to hold the puck in before he eventually got a chance over by the net. So, like, I think he's showing you something as far as being a bottom six guy next year. But I still feel like, Connor, the guy with the biggest upside of all the young guys the Bruins have is Matt Poitras. And we'll see where it goes next season. And he's going to, continue to develop down in Providence. But of the guys that I've seen this year, I think Lowry and Poitras still have the highest ceiling as far as, like, the guys maybe 25 and under that are on this roster.
Yeah, because I think you look at Minton, and I really like Minton as a prospect. I think the Bruins do. But I think he's I don't think he's ever going to be a flashy player. I think, he ideally could be like your third line linchpin for 5+ years and, plays solid two-way game, can be a 40-point guy. And, there's, I think, value is to kind of like what Coyle was for years, right? Where it's maybe sometimes the stats don't always reflect the impact. And also there's just that stability of every year you'd go into the training camp, be like, oh, we got Coyle at 3C, we're good to go. And I think that's what you hope a guy like Minton can do with kind of the game he plays. Has a good shot, smart player. Again, Bruins fans are probably just wishing for more of a high-end skilled player, but I think he's a future NHL player, and I do like his game. I agree with Lysell. That's a guy that you like the skill at times, but it just feels like you can't just put it all together, right? There's some stretches, especially early in that game against Chicago, where was really skating well, trying to make things happen. And it feels like that confidence from getting that point on Tuesday against the Devils was carrying over. And you're like, all right, you got something here. Then he has that kind of mix up with Lowry that leads to Foligno's first goal. And after that, it feels like the ebbs and flows are way too much. When things are going well, you see the skill, but when they don't, the consistency is just not there, it's frustrating, right? Because you have a guy that if he could step in and be a middle six scoring player, you see the skating and the puck play and everything like that. I don't know if you can put it all together really. So yeah, I don't know if he's in the mix next year. And Poitras is the interesting one because I really couldn't tell you what exactly the expectations are for the guy. Because I think you see the skill level, right? And I think the conventional thinking is another offseason. He's not recovering from a shoulder surgery. He gets stronger, all that stuff. Just what are they mapping out in terms of what his projections are, what he could be next year? Are they thinking he could challenge Middlestat for a 2C spot? Is he more of a 3C? Where exactly does he fit into the mix? Because the poise with the puck and the playmaking is there. You see it at times. But just what are the Bruins expecting out of him, I think, is the bigger question.
I still see when I watch him a lot of David Krejci-like qualities. I see there is a lot of similarities to the way David Krejci played the game, the way he thinks the game, the way he operated as a center and was an incredibly steady, productive second line center for the Bruins for a long time. I see a lot of that in Matt Poitras. And I think if you put him with better wingers, he'd be even better. You put him with a couple of high skill guys that can score, and he's a playmaker and a guy that can do what he does with the puck in the middle. I think he's going to look and play a lot like number 46. I see a lot of parallels between those players. And Krejci was never the fastest guy in the world either, kind of like him, never the most explosive skater. He would change pace with the puck, keep guys off balance, slow it down when he needed to. They do a lot of the same things. And if you think about when Krejci like finally really established himself in the NHL, it took a few years. You know, he didn't make it, and it took him maybe 2 years of development and kind of coming up and down a little bit before he really became who he was going to be. So I still think there's potential there for him to max out as a second line center. I've seen enough already, to think he's at a higher level than a guy like Lysell as far as how you view him, and that the potential is still there if he can continue to track as he does. And it's a great point that you make about him finally being healthy this summer and you're not coming off of surgery. So he's going to be able to rehab, work out, like skate, like all that stuff to make sure he is in absolute peak condition when he comes into training camp next year. So that's a fantastic thing as well. So all that's going to be interesting. But I think the guy that is going to get people excited is whoever they take in the top 5 of this draft. When things shake out with the draft lottery, maybe it'll be even higher than that. Who knows? We'll see. But, when you go down the list, these are guys I have not watched play a lot, but there's a lot of good centers in the top 10. So you think the Bruins are going to get a fantastic player with the pick that they end up getting, and they're going to have to hit on that. They really have no choice but to do that. All right, Connor, thank you very much for joining us. Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS and Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's also thank Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Sports tickets, concert tickets, comedy theater, anything you can think of tickets. Go to Game Time and get them. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it, Connor?
Game time.
Game time. You know what else time it is? It's time to close up this podcast and say goodbye. Thank you, everybody else out there, for listening. Connor, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And everybody else out there, we'll see you at the rink.